today. For those of you who joined our first masterclass back in May, welcome back. It's great to have you here again. And for anyone joining us for the first time, quick bit of context. In our first session, we showed how a global bank cut Teradata cost by 30% through better Lineage, users tracking, and automation. Today, we are answering the question that came up after that. Does it last? We are covering how the bank kept the savings permanent and turned the same work into AI-ready data foundation. To walk us through it, I'm glad to introduce Elaine Fletcher, CBO at Hoonartek and former Teradata professional services partner. Elaine, thanks for joining. Over to you.
Hello, everybody. Hi. So yes, I'm Elaine Fletcher. I've been here with Teradata, with Hoonartek now for almost 7 years. And prior to that, I was with Teradata for about 5 years. And prior to that, I was with IBM Global Services. So been in this kind of territory for quite a long time. So as a result of the earlier webinar that you guys were probably all in, hopefully, we've had quite a lot of follow-up where people are saying, okay, we're now sort of 7 to 8 months forward. So what's happened, has that 30% started to disappear because new data is coming in? Have the ROI savings started to erode away? No, they haven't, not at all. Now, the reason for that is we have intelligence automated archiving that's driven by business rules that was put in when we actually got the 30% savings in there. So basically, at the end of each month, the auto archiving runs to make sure that the data never grows above the limit where we've kind of set in business rules. It's quite sophisticated, really, because every table, every data set has different archiving rules based on how the business is consuming that data and also the dependencies in the lineage, etc. But a simple answer to the question is no, it hasn't climbed back and it never will because it's business rule contained. So that's one part of it. Let's just put to bed the savings and the fact that they are stable. But for me, the real benefit that's driving the business forward is on top of that. So we've liberated 30% of their annual costs. Now, what are they doing with it? So they're reinvesting it basically to improve their data governance. So I'd like to really focus on this webinar in how they're using exactly the same blueprint that we used to get them the 30% cost saving, how they're actually using it now to improve their governance. So we look at the art of the possible, which is the data governance capability maturity curve. We'll then have a look at how we populated the business catalog, how we set up some active controls for unified data quality, how we're now automating the PII data protection, and how that's really enabling the bank to get to the position where they can publish curated data products and get ready for AI, particularly agentic AI, to leverage that safer curated data sets. So the capability maturity curve, to be quite frank, the first 3 legs of this journey, left to right, were done prior to the migration for the bank onto cloud. We had to do that because some data had to stay on-prem for legal reasons. So we had to have a glossary and a data catalog that was unified end-to-end across the business. That wasn't there before. So that was our first step that we had to do as our passive metadata foundation to be able to drive that data migration. We then also had to generate end-to-end data lineage of the as-is environments so that we could really understand at a granular level all of the data dependencies. So it's not just a case of saying this data set has to stay on-prem for legal reasons. We had to identify all of the upstream and downstream dependencies on those data sets to make sure those data sets didn't also go onto cloud. Otherwise, Query Grid would have been very active and would have eaten away at all of the 30% cost savings. So we made sure in a very frugal way that we put on cloud what wouldn't be exercising Query Grid, so to keep the costs minimized long term, which has been very successful. So what I want to focus on today really is going up the curve. So starting with data quality. Data quality, this tick here, this is basically about analyzing the data at rest. So we identify data quality issues. We can have business rules generated to automate some of that redress and repair of the business of the data quality issues. Other ones, the bank doesn't want to be automated. They want to be surfaced for human in the loop, which is fine. So basically, case by case, the bank decides what they want to do as a result of different data quality issues hitting different data sets at different points in business cycles. So it's completely configurable and under the control of the bank. Nothing is coded here. It's all business rules. So that's the mainstay of data quality as a foundation service. So for the first time, end-to-end, data quality is managed. There is one data quality way of doing things. There is a data quality policy that is applied consistently across all of the data sets on all of the technologies all of the time. So that is a big step forward in terms of data readiness and data trust for the business, basically. Now, within that, there's a small subset of data sets that we call critical feeds, where the slightest pollution would cause issues to the business, particularly the regulated business steps. So for those, even though the inline real-time processing does slow things down, absolutely, it will make a very tiny impact because there is new processing happening. So it's used sparingly, but those critical feeds basically now have a policeman on the door who says stop when a certain data quality rule is not met. So that makes sure that those particular subsets of data are never, ever polluted. So it's not good enough to land the data and report it in the data quality scorecard and remediate at the end of month or whenever. This is literally, the subset that has a hard stop against it. It is used sparingly, obviously, because performance impacts, but so certain data sets really need that. Those are, again, configured in with business rules. So nothing, you'll probably get sick of me saying this, but nothing is hard-coded here, and nothing is coded at all. It is business rules driven. The next stage is basically producing some automated data governance policies there so that things are always consistent, reliable, such as the auto-masking of PII, and also publishing data products. Now, what that allows the business to do is publish out curated data products and also tighten up self-service. And behind those data products, there's also a kind of a policing that's going on, because automatically we are always checking who is using those curated data products and who started off using those curated data products and has now, for example, gone rogue and reverted back to their old way of working. So people would ask me, well, why would that ever happen? And does it happen? Well, absolutely, it happens everywhere, sadly to say. And I can understand it, because when you think of it, if for one measure there are 20 different variants across an organization, and often there are 50 or 100 different variants of that metric across an organization, and then the organization puts in place some business rules to align into one version of truth, one metric, there are going to be winners and there are going to be losers against that metric. So maybe in my department, I always calculated that metric a slightly different way, and I always look good. Now I don't look so good. So while all the attention's on that metric and it's newly conformed and unified, I'll toe the line. 8 months in, no one's looking at that anymore. I'm just going to revert back to my old way of doing things. I guess no one will notice, I'll just do it. So what we do is we actually look at longer term. Every day we're policing who is using and continuing to use those curated data products and who's actually slipping back into the old ways. So that really allows us to make sure that as a whole, the bank stays on track and there is always one view of truth. Now that's really important, because we're not just looking at the curated data products and the pushing of those data products out, but we're also policing the consumption side of those data products to make sure that the people who should be using them are always using them. So let's take a bit of a deeper dive on each of these to see how does that actually happen within the blueprint? How long does it take? How easy is it? How much automation is there, etc.? So let's start off. These are the things that we did back last year, actually, populating the catalogue. So we use AI-driven discovery across the enterprise to basically identify the different data sources. We can then do metadata ingestion to enrich those data sources, and we use semantic discovery then to populate out the business context of things. The business can then either use us or do it themselves to curate trusted business-ready data products. And for most organizations, it's a bit of both. We might start off in a joint team with them, helping them to curate some data products until they're really comfortable with how they're setting up the business rules and how they're doing it and testing it, etc., and making sure that they're making use of the automated reconciliation and health checks, etc., behind those data products. Once we're happy that they're good at doing it and they're comfortable at doing it, then we can step back and they can do all of it themselves if they want to, which a lot of people do, because then they have the business agility to not have to get in touch with Hoonartek every time they want to change a business rule. They just do it themselves. And then, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, there's access tracking in terms of understanding who is using the different data sets. So there's PII controls on that, but also there's usage tracking to make sure that the right people who should be using the curated data products for trusted business consumption are indeed still using them. So the next step that they did, unified data quality controls. So like most organizations, over the years, business end users, different departments have found a need for new data sets. Now, in truth, most of those data sets were not new. They were already being used elsewhere in the bank, but they didn't have the visibility at that time. So business departments kind of went rogue and did a new extract of the same source, put it in a different place, put different business rules on it for, or hard-coded more often than not, some data quality, and they did their own enrichment. So basically, you get into the stage where for every one business, real-world business metric, you might have 10, 20, 50 or more variants or flavors of that metric that sometimes reconcile, sometimes don't reconcile, but people don't really understand why. Well, that one normally does reconcile, but Tuesday, full moon, one leg in the air, it never reconciles then. So I think we've all been in that kind of position, and it's a very, very difficult job to try to find out why things don't reconcile. What we do, we use data discovery, we use data lineage, etc., various different constructs to help us to understand why there are multiple versions of truth. We then rationalize them, which we did under the remit of 30% cost savings. We got rid of the multiple copies of metrics, which unified the business a lot. We then implemented enterprise-wide data quality rules. So these are business rules. They're not technology. The business own and drive and are completely responsible for those business rules. So what happens is they set up those business rules. We then set up the reconciliation and the automation behind those to make sure that they are always enacted. We also implement automated inheritance to make sure that if a business class has a new business rule attached to it for data quality, maybe there are several hundreds or sometimes several thousands of technical data fields associated with that business class. So automated inheritance basically flows down all of those, that new business rule for data quality down to all of those different data entities, no matter what technology they're sitting on. So that's a really important thing. So for example, in a regulated industry like this bank is, the regulator may from time to time come back and say, right, we're changing how this metric is calculated. So the business rule for calculating it has to change, and also the data quality rules behind it have to change. So those two business rules then get changed, get tested to death. When they get approved by through the workflow and the human in the loop, then all the reconciliation runs behind it to make sure that everything is still in line and none of those hundreds of data sets that have now been changed have a problem, that make sure everything still reconciles. So it gives the bank a lot more agility to create the business rules and to amend those business rules when either the business changes or the regulator asks them to jump through a hoop. It means they can do it very quickly and with confidence, knowing that nothing has fallen through the gap. So here's an example of how we show people how the data quality scores sit. So it's one thing having a balanced scorecard, which of course we do publish, so people can see how is the general state of the data. But let's say in this example, one of the metrics has gone red. So the first thing I want to know is, well, why on earth has it gone red? It's been fine up until now. Is everything red all of a sudden? Has something corrupted that particular feed? And we can see here by just taking a quick look at the lineage, no, nothing's polluted the feed. There's just one particular attribute within that has gone red. So most of it's green, a couple of ambers here, but there's one thing that has gone red. We know exactly what it is. We know now when it went red. We know why it went red. So we can actually go back to the supplier of that data feed and get some redress on that particular feed. So very quickly, actionable data quality scores. So the next thing I want to talk about is automated PII data protection, which is really important under GDPR, DPDP. There's various different legislations for different parts of the world, but they're all very similar to GDPR. So if you hear me say GDPR, please just replace that with whatever your local country variant is. So we will start off by automating the PII discovery, which for a lot of big organizations is a very complex thing that they haven't managed to do. So we will start off by automating the PII discovery in what we would call the core systems. So data warehousing, ERP, call center, all of the main sort of core business applications. They will be very rich in PII. So we will identify all the PII in them, and we will track through Lineage exactly where that PII is arriving at that application and how it's shared across that application and how it leaves that application to be shared with other business applications within the organization and how it's shared with third parties. So partners, agencies, etc., all the people that you do business with, and exactly clients, yes, who will obviously have access to their own PII. So that allows us then to, what we would say, crawl the lineage from the main core system out to where that's sharing data to and from. We then look at each of those systems as the second line calls, and we will look at where else they're getting PII in and how they're sharing PII out. So we gradually move from kind of the core of the business all the way out. And now we can do that right end to end, which we do for a lot of businesses. Other businesses will say, actually, I have a different view of risk. I don't really want to go full end to end. I don't think there's a need for that. Maybe they're not in a regulated industry. So they will often stop at the core systems to say, well, 80-20 rule, we've got 80% of it. That's enough to satisfy the regulator that we've taken this seriously and done it. So again, it's totally under the business's control as to how far they want to go with this. But it is highly automated and it's highly repeatable. So, for example, if you've done it across a very complex ERP system, you can then rerun that when a new version or a new release of that ERP system comes out, and it's all totally automated. So we don't need to go and bother business SMEs, etc., to ask questions about different things. It's basically we harvest the metadata in and we work from that. So here's an example where we can see some very complex lineage, and we have tagged this with business classes and tagged it with PII. So you can see exactly where the PII is coming in from, how it's being transformed in the green, and how it's been laid to rest in a new position. And then how it goes through to a totally new system, goes through some transforms there, laid to rest, and then into a third layer, and then laid to rest for a data consumption layer. On this particular example, there isn't another set where it's going out to the external third parties, but often there is. So you can just see how easy it is as human beings to look at this and understand it. It wasn't easy to calculate it all and track it all and mark it all, which is why we use AI to do that automatically. But having done all of that heavy lifting, it's then surfaced in a very accessible way to the business to understand. It's also very well liked by a number of different regulators in different parts of the world because they have a nice portal and they can self-serve and look at this for themselves. They don't have to rely on the accuracy or completeness of answers that they ask to the business. They can just get in there with the portal and have a look for themselves. So it's well liked. So the next step, really, this is about publishing curated data products. It's not really worth taking this step until you've sorted out PII and sorted out data quality. So you've now got trust in the data. So you've got past that foundational stage to a stage where you're mature enough to start curating data products, enriching things, and publishing them out there. As I mentioned before, there's two sides to this coin. There's the production cycle of curating the data products and publishing them. And then there's the consumption cycle of understanding exactly who is cutting over to those new data products and when and whether they stick. That is a big step in its own right, because as you might imagine, if you have even 10 versions of one metric, the business has been used to reporting on those metrics for a number of years. So the shape of the curve in each of those is well understood by all the people in the departments that consume those. Now suddenly you're moving over to a trusted data product, the shape of the curve will be somewhat different. So there's a little bit of a bedding in period where you can give people extra support so that they understand that the fact that there were 10 different shapes of curve about the same one business entity up until now has gone away. There is now only one pen. We don't have a biro, a pencil, a permanent marker, etc. There's just one definition of pen in this business, and we all understand what pen means, and it's consistent and it's reconciled right across the business end to end. So we're giving the usage visibility, and we're giving easy access, and we're governing the access and full auditability to those data products. In parallel with the what I would call the golden copy data products for the main metrics across the business, there will be a tier 2, which we would call, these are the self-service elements. So across the business data catalog, business departments can just go into that. They can have a Google-like search. They can find new metrics, etc. These aren't curated data products. These are the mainstay, what I would call the tail of the dog. So you've got the main body of the dog, which is the curated data products, but around that there's millions of data sets that maybe only one department or maybe part of the department would use. So they would access those through self-service, through the business data catalog. Again, it's governance, and again, the data quality is consistent across the enterprise, but we're not forcing them down the route of a curated data product. We're giving them the freedom to do ad hoc analysis across those data sets and to use them in any shape or form that they want to. They're trusted data and they're governance, and they're very easy to find now because we have a consistent catalogue. So where does that get them to step 5? So step 5 really, I would say, is towards the end of the journey in the capability maturity curve. It's taking them to the state where it's actually safe now to populate automated AI agents, so agentic AI. So there's several things that has to happen with that. There's the AI-ready data foundation, which is basically all the things that we've talked about up until now on this presentation. So we have trusted data for AI. There's no garbage in, garbage out. There's no skew because those data sets are actively monitored for skew. So when skew starts to come into a data set, the different models that have been trained on that data set will automatically receive a nudge to say it's a good idea to retrain or retrain soon because the skew is starting to come in here. The other thing that we offer is a way for AI teams, when they're building new models, to sign on to the portal and to request AI training data. Now, one of the big issues with GDPR is that nobody went back to their customers years ago when GDPR came in and asked them the question when they were requesting consent to use their data. Nobody actually said, can we use your data to train our AI models? Yeah, because they weren't there then. Now they are there, and nobody really wants to go back to their client base now and ask, can we use your live data to train our AI models? Because as we all know, it's a bit like Marmite. Some people love AI, some people are afraid or very anti-AI. So nobody wants to go and ask that question. So the easiest way to get around this constraint is to make sure that AI models have representative, accurate data sets. So they're a complete, they reconcile completely with production, but you cannot recognize a single human. You can't identify a single real life human in those data sets. So they are GDPR safe. So we actually allow AI teams to log on to the portal and request. They fill in a little online form that asks a few questions about the nature of the model and the data sets that they require and the referential integrity requirements across different fields and data sets, because often those data sets are coming from lots of different places that are blended in together. So we ask what they require about all of those kinds of things, and then we synthesize those data sets actually from production. So we can shuffle in a very intelligent way to adhere to referential integrity. So, for example, within the model, you'll still see the same cohort of females between this age and this age that have this kind of attribute and do that kind of activity. But when you drill down, Elaine Fletcher will be living at a different address within that same postcode region, whatever. Lots of different things like that. So that's another feature that we found is really, really helpful to allow AI teams to be very agile, build their models quickly, have the data sets ready for training them, but also when skew is starting to be present in some of the data sets in production, we will also automatically recreate some of the training data to represent that same change, that same drift and skew in that, so that they can retrain the models to be accurate then on the new production data sets. So that was all I wanted to tell you about. Now, one of the things that I think you'll probably, or if it was me on the end of this this webinar, I would be saying, that all sounds fantastic, but I don't really believe that exists. Can we see it? So what we're going to do in 2 or 3 weeks' time is we'll be scheduling a live demo so you can have a look at all of this kind of stuff. So all the features and capabilities that I've talked about today, we'll be able to demonstrate to you. So hopefully see you soon. So back over to Najib.
Hey, thanks, Elaine. Thanks. That was these were some really great insights. So just quickly before I let you go, there are some great questions coming up in through the chat. So let's get into a few before we close out, right? So the first question is, Teradata is not my only problem. We have got hundreds of satellite systems feeding into a new ERP tool, and every one of them holds metrics differently. Can the blueprint handle that mess, or is it just for Teradata?
Yeah, that's a very good question, actually. So, to be honest, the majority of our customers who use this blueprint don't have a Teradata at all. The blueprint is technology agnostic, so we work across pretty much every technology that's out there. And if we don't already to support that technology, we do build some custom metadata ingesters so that we can support that technology. So, in the years that we've been using the blueprint, we've never yet had a circumstance where we haven't been able to ingest everything that the client has wanted. So yes, we can work quite happily over any technology. So to address your specific question about how to integrate a new ERP system, I think it was, where you have hundreds of different satellite applications, that's obviously a non-trivial problem. So the way we would go about that with Blueprint is we would first ingest the metadata for your new ERP system. So we would have that over there as the target. We would then go through and ingest iteratively the metadata for each of the hundreds of satellites. And we would then use semantic discovery to automate the mapping of each of the fields from each of those satellites into your target. So most of the time, 80-20 rule, that is done automatically. It's a no-brainer, age goes there and plugs into here, etc. But there are always a few gotchas. So I would say 20% of it, sometimes less, but on average, 10, 20% will require a human in the loop. So the automated semantic discovery within the blueprint will suggest 2 or sometimes 3 proposals where it can say, this data set is obviously aligned with this one. We've got 80% certainty on that, but we've also got a 62% certainty on this one and a similar one on this one. So it's up to the business to decide where do they want to put that. It could plug quite happily into either of these 3 places. So sometimes there's some business decisions that need to go on. You haven't got to discover it. The discovery's been done and the automation's been done for that mapping. So it takes a very small amount of time. And the nice thing that I'm sure you're asking now is, having done all those mappings, then how do we actually physically do that integration? Well, Blueprint can then automate how it generates the integration script. So yes, it's all done automatically, as you might expect. So yeah, be happy to talk to you about that offline later. Thank you.
That's a great question. Whoever asked that question, you can please reach out to us directly on our socials, or else, we always have links on our website. Okay, so the next question is, our data controller wants to track how PII moves in and out of our systems, including third parties end-to-end. Sounds like Blueprint can do that for Teradata, but what about everywhere else?
Okay, so that's a similar problem in that, yes, we are technology agnostic. And a lot of our clients who do have Teradata, that's obviously the data warehousing part, but end-to-end across the enterprise, there are hundreds and hundreds of different platforms, some on cloud, some on-prem, wherever, different technologies, some old ones, some very old ones, some big old mainframes, and some very modern solutions. And to be honest, we're quite happy to ingest the metadata from all of those different parts of your estate and to blend them across so that we can track the PII literally when it comes in to your organization through whichever channel it arrives, and every hop that it goes through across all of the different technologies and how it leaves the organization. So you'll remember, if you remember when we a few minutes ago looked, we had a little screenshot showing the lineage end to end, and you could see the different systems and how it popped across. That wasn't actually a Teradata example, so it shows you we work with things that are not Teradata, and of course, yes, we cover Teradata as well. Yeah.
Sure. Thanks, Elaine. Thanks for that answer. So yes, with that, that's a wrap. Elaine, thank you for the insight. Everyone, thanks for joining. And for those of you who are wondering, the on-demand recording will be out shortly. Follow our social handles to stay updated on more sessions like this. Thanks again, Elaine, and thanks all. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And the stream is ended.